Hey, and welcome to RVL, Right versus Left. The left is evil. My name is Brad Lee, joined by Rob B. Hey, Rob, how you doing today?
All right, it's hot down here.
It's cool up here. We got some overcast. Looks like it might storm. I'm in Dallas. Rob, where are you from?
Well, I'm in Houston. I'm not from here. I think
Well,
I'm a little more accurately to be said. I'm from the Northwest, from the Oregon area.
that's the same as me. We both grew up together, so fucking smartass.
Yeah,
So
I know.
today we're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter and how they relate to the rise in crime that we've had since the organization has been founded. We'll be starting with a little bit about Black Lives Matter and how they're a evil, socialist, Marxist organization, not really concerned with the Black lives. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Right. So, first of all, the understanding has to be made that Black Lives Matter, the organization, was essentially founded in 2013 after George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin. So the problem is, got all my sounds in the background here. Um, the problem is, it had nothing to do with it. The real birth of BLM actually occurred arguably in 1928. So we've all heard Patrice Cullins and her soundbite at the foundation of the BLM organization giving interviews about how she was a trained Marxist. So to really understand the true goal of BLM, you have to get down to what that means as far as being a trained Marxist. So we're going to do a fast backwards march. Who trained Patrice Cullen? Well, Patrice Cullen
Colors.
was trained was
These colors.
Kohler, sorry. Um, who trained her? She was trained by Mann, who was a member of the Weather Underground. The Weather Underground was a Marxist organization, anti-government organization, anti-colonial organization, um, and all these things that they're pointing out here are very much tied in to how the communists and the Marxists wanted to spread socialism around the world. So you go all the way back to 1928 at the European meetings of Communism International and the original communist conventions. Um, you needed total chaos to implement socialism. That's why every time there is a communist revolution, there is chaos before the Communist Party takes power. Whether they call themselves socialists or communists, they're all Marxists. So when you go back to 1928, they were looking at the different targets for the spread of Marxism. And Russia was easy. They had an aristocracy. Italy had an aristocracy. Most of Europe had an aristocracy. That's why a lot of those countries still have at least a soft socialism or soft Marxism that's still alive and well to this day. Um, but if you look at the United States, we were a different creature. We had a middle class, which most countries don't have. And the majority of our population fell into that middle class. And what that meant was you could not get a majority of the population dissenting. So now this need to get a majority of the population dissenting ties into so much more than just the BLM as we go forward. I'm going to explain how it also ties into immigration as it's pursued by the leftists in this country. But when they analyzed American society, the only inroad that they saw was in the black community, because that was the only group that they could target for agitation. In Russia, they targeted the peasantry and got them to fight and rise up. In Vietnam later, it was anti-colonialism. In Korea later, or Korea even before Vietnam, it was like kind of the colonialism, because Korea was first taken over by Japan, then China, and like, so that kind of gave them their anti-colonial bent too. So all these colonial powers had their government that was the aristocracy, and pretty much everybody else suffered below them. So it made very clear divides where like 90% of the population could be pitted against the 10% leadership. You with me so far?
So far. So
Okay.
Marxism has evolved since Karl Marx.
Karl Marx is where the
ideology came from.
Well, I don't know that it really evolved.
Well, so from what I'm getting from the Encyclopedia Britannica is, sorry, a body of Marxism is a body of doctrine developed by Karl Marx and to a lesser extent by Friedrich Engels in the mid-19th century. It originally consisted of three related ideas: a philosophical anthropology of history and an economic and political program. There is also Marxism as it has been understood and practiced by various socialist movements, particularly before 1914. Then there is Soviet Marxism as worked out by Lenin and modified by Stalin, which under the name of Marxism Leninism became
set up after the Russian Revolution
in 1917. And then it goes into Mao Zedong,
Marxism,
Leninism, and various Marxisms in the developing world. There were also post-World War II
Marxisms
that have modified Marxist thought with borrowings from modern philosophies, principally from those of
Martin
Heidegger, but also from Sigmund Freud and others.
Right.
But
racist.
Like he thought absolutely. That the black people were lesser being.
Yeah, and it's a familiar ideology across the world.
Right.
It's, I mean, so to some degree, you have to say that racism is inherent to some degree in all people, to some degree. And I say that because when you even look in Africa, you have one tribe of black people killing the other tribe of black people only because they're from a different tribe, because they're not the right kind of black people. In Europe, you had one kind of white people killing the other kind of white people, and I'm not even talking about the religious wars. That's another issue altogether. But just looking at the, one group of white people killing another group of white people, Armenian genocide. Not that we're allowed to say that didn't happen, right? But like the Balkan Wars, all of that. So
what were all these wars for? Land, property, or
no? I'm specifically talking about genocidal wars. One group of people trying to wipe out another group of people just because of who they are. That's like specifically what I'm talking about there. So, now while Marx didn't really weave that racism into his ideology, it was obviously a part of it. But Marxism acknowledged that it's nothing like any existing form of governance, and you kind of have to tear down society in order to implement it. Because and it sounds great, and again, in a country where you have a minority aristocracy and a majority, because the peasants want to have more, and the aristocracy is not big enough to hold them down. Does that make sense? So that's why now I would say that the Chinese institution of communism or Marxism was different because it was actually a military coup. Like, that was a military coup. It wasn't a social uprising. It was a military coup over the military overthrowing the government and loyalist forces fighting against so-called revolutionary forces, which they weren't really revolutionary forces. They were a coup. Yeah, fast forward to why did we ever recognize the government that performed a military coup? Hey, if we hadn't taken that stance, we'd probably be dealing with different political strata in the world today. So ultimately, society has to be deconstructed to implement socialism. The United States presents a problem to Marxists because probably 70% of the population does not want society to change. So how do you get that to happen? Well, initially they had a hard time even catching ground in the Black community because, like I said, the Black population was doing better and better and better. And they were actually doing better, ironically, under Jim Crow laws than they're doing now. So they really couldn't get a foothold and a push to spread communism or to cause the civil strife that they needed to implement socialism. So you just ended up with like random like spurts. Now, post, Marx was very near he's the mid-19th century, so you're talking around the time of the Civil War and of slaves. And so as you fast forward in the march to civil rights, which unfortunately took another 80 years because half the society was fighting against those civil rights. Kind of lost my train of thought there.
So you were talking about civil rights.
Right. So, as they were moving, they were still like struggling for their civil rights, but, yeah, I know. They weren't gaining, or they were making improvements. Like, it wasn't instantaneous, but they were advancing towards an improvement of life. Home ownership was growing, more of the Black populace was getting educated, families were doing better. And it's really hard to get people to throw off a system when their lives are getting better under the system. So then when you fast forward again, obviously, World War I, World War II, you ended up with huge patriotic movements. So in between that, World War I and World War II, you get the communist revolution starting to happen around the world. And again, primarily with the Soviet Union and the other like socialist countries. So that's the other thing. The Soviet Union didn't just go in and overthrow the governments in all these republics. These republics actually went through like similar socialist revolutions backed by the Soviet Union. And then later, when they tried to step out of line, then the Soviet Union would crush them, which is what happened in Czechoslovakia later. But it was pretty much popular movements to start out. In the US though, like once we got through the Depression, then we had the Second World War, everybody was patriotic, and it was really hard to create division because of the Second World War. And it actually like created a lot of patriotism and nationalism around the world, centered around that. But then it also like kind of created the Soviet Union as that flagship of communism in the world. Does that make sense? So they're like, yeah, look, see how great it can work. So it gave everybody a goal to look for. And then in the US, they still really couldn't get any traction because they just couldn't agitate. Because again, we had a good middle class that was happy with their lives. And they saw having upward mobility, or at least they could stay like placated in the lives that they have. And then the lower class was improving because like it's always been true in America, like, you know, basically, you know, make good decisions, work hard, and you can lift yourself out of poverty. But then with the coming to the civil rights movement, it kind of timed and coincided with the Vietnam War and the protests there. So then all of a sudden we had this, I mean, the first place that Marxists went to infiltrate was in the colleges, and that's why when it came time for the Vietnam War and the activism around the Vietnam War, it was based around the colleges because they were a captive audience to these socialist-leaning professors, like espousing their mantras. Now, I would actually like argue right along with them that we had no business being in Vietnam. Like it was France's colony. It wasn't a NATO issue. We had no business being there. And a lot of false crap was done. We could do another whole issue on all the lies that led to the U.S. being involved in the Vietnam War and the escalation of the Vietnam War. Don't really need to get into all of that. But it was one of those pivotal movements that were used to create agitation in society. And then you finally started having, along with the civil rights movement and some key assassinations, and then some very highly publicized cases of injustice against Black people. And then it kind of like laid the groundwork for the foundation of the Black Panthers as a community policing project to protect Black people from the police. And that's what created the like the real idea that the police are the enemy, or more to the point, your government is your enemy. And that's the real key that Marxism needed, was to instill the belief that the government is the enemy. And the Black Panthers helped with that. So around the same time, the Weather Underground was an anti-government organization. And they were responsible for bombing police headquarters, bombing police cars, bombing the Capitol, bombing the Pentagon. So this is all stuff that the Weather Underground did. And Mann, who is Patrisse Culler's mentor, the one who trained her as a Marxist agitator, was a part of the Weather Underground. And I forget the gal's name, but the gal that was running the finances at the beginning of the BLM organization was actually from the Weather Underground as well, and had actually served prison time for her involvement in the bombings for the Weather Underground. So there's literally a direct path from the goals in the 1928 Communist International, the Comintern meetings, and BLM. It's a direct march to that because it's what they always wanted. Since they couldn't use the classes to create political turmoil, they were going to use the races in our country to create political turmoil. Still with me, Brad?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it continues to be pushed. Obviously, leftists pretty much control our education system. So they've continued to promote these things, and then of course, Marxism wants to destroy the faith in pretty much everything: family, church, and the existing government. And you look at the ideas that get spread out of college: atheism, communism, radical racial theory, to help agitate people and to get, because there's not a big enough black population to create the total societal unrest that they need in order to implement socialism. So now they're getting what's eventually going to be white middle class people, pump them full of some racial guilt, and get them on board with a movement to destroy the foundational institutions of our country. And it's bad because, Marxism just wants to implement what it is and stay there, whereas the whole foundation of our country is started off with a good idea, but we're going to keep getting better at it.
Mm-hmm.
So they stopped trying to get better at it and started trying to destroy it and unravel it instead. So the statistics, if you go back here, let me pull up the statistic I had here. So if we go back to 2015, this is 2 years after the founding of Black Lives Matter. Okay. What do you think the largest group of people killed by police were? Well, according to Colin Kaepernick,
it's always been white people.
Right. But they make it like it's all about white people. But 2015, fatal police shootings: 494 whites, 258 blacks, 172 Hispanics, 38 other, and 28 were the races unknown.
How many blacks?
258. 258. And that's fatal shootings. That's not unarmed. That's fatal shootings.
Mm-hmm. And in 2017, it went down to 223.
Right. This is okay, but this is 2015. Okay, so this is 2 years into the BLM thing.
Right.
Right. So you look at this now. Black people accounted for 62% of all robberies. And that's key because robberies are the situation where the police are most likely to end up dealing with an armed perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
So they're responsible for 62% of the robberies, and yet not even half of the fatal police shootings. And in the majority of those, a weapon was involved or violent resistance. In 2015, and this is from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 11 unarmed black men were shot, 12 unarmed white men were shot. So even though they accounted for a higher percentage of the police interactions because of the higher percentage of crimes that they were involved in, because white people constituted 36% of all robbery.
Right.
So even though they're twice as likely to deal with the police, they're half as likely to get shot.
Okay, and what percentage of America do white people make up?
Very close to 50%. It's actually like creeping down.
And right, which, well, we could go into the great replacement theory, which is really a Jewish thing.
In another episode.
But
what
percentage of the population? What percent of the population are black people?
Roughly 13%, and they've held steady for the last 100 years.
13%, and they're having more confrontations with the police officer than white people.
Yes. So and okay, and so
That's
we're not even going to get into that in this talk. That'll be another episode. So
Okay.
for this episode, we're just going to talk about the actual Marxist link and what it's leading to. There's a lot of different factors that have to be taken into account for the black participation rate, we'll call it, in criminal activity.
Right.
So the you mentioned the Great Replacement. I want to say the reason why, because it does tie into this, but I'm not going to get into all the BS around the stupid Great Replacement stuff.
Right, because what it is really the Jew. It's a theory about the Jew.
Right. But here is what it is creating, because people that come here that don't have documents, that don't have any way of making a living, they are going to add to the poor people that will be willing to fight against the government. And you
commit crimes
the
against other people that have more wealth.
Right. Well, and just generally willing to upset society, because they're going to come here and they're going to have a bad life.
Right.
Because they can't participate. They're going to be locked out of society because they're not supposed to be here.
Right.
And so the Democrats are doing it on purpose, because they're trying to create a bigger class of victims so they can drive that wedge to completely create a societal upheaval so they can install their socialism.
But
there is too big of a middle class, and they want to help disintegrate the middle class and make sure there's enough poor people to outnumber the middle class and the upper class.
But then their victims are going to be...
They don't care.
The people that they want to be their victims eventually are going to be oppressors, and then the whole victim class is going to switch.
Except the people that they use to launch the revolutions become the victim of the revolution later. Does that make sense? The peasantry led the communist revolution, and then the peasantry filled up all the gulags.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they have no
intention
of creating a better life for everybody. Their intention is to create an equally miserable life for everybody except for themselves.
Right.
Which is why, you look at Patrice Cullors, she's got a bunch of multi-million-dollar properties.
And then when
BLM has $40 million on hand, you don't see her going and buying houses for black people all over the country. You see her spending $6 million on a house for herself, giving $1 million to her baby daddy, giving another $1 million to other family members.
And that's just one house. And she's gotten 6 of them, and they're all mansions. She hasn't spent a dime
and they're all
on any black community. And where are these houses? They're not in black communities. They're in gated communities.
Yeah, she lives in predominantly white neighborhoods. Why? Because predominantly white suburban neighborhoods don't have a lot of crime. So it's funny that Black Lives Matter to you, but you don't want to live anywhere near black people. So anyway, that's the path from communism and Marxism to BLM. So that's the connection. That's where the Weather Other Ground comes in. The Black Panthers were also a Marxist socialist movement that was specifically set up to fight against police, to fight against authority. And that's the big one, is to train people to be okay with fighting authority.
Right. Which is why they're letting in the illegal immigrants at a record number.
Because that is just to create more impoverished people. They're trying to increase poverty.
Right. And those are the people that are
willing of the population suffering to install socialism.
And those are the people that are willing to fight against authority.
Even if they're not now, if you make their life miserable enough, they will be.
Right. Which is why they left their country in the first place.
Exactly. But I mean, obviously the race narrative doesn't work, because if this was a horrible racist country, this wouldn't be the goal of those people to come here and suffer under racism.
Right. Yeah.
It wouldn't make any sense.
Country.
So
which I don't believe we are.
And the reason why they actually want to limit the number of people that come from socialist countries is kind of funny, because they don't want people from Cuba, Venezuela, all those places to come here. They want people from Mexico and all of that.
Because they don't want people to come from communist countries who already know what communism is like, because then they can't fool them into their way of thinking.
Exactly.
Right. So now, if someone comes from Cuba looking for a better life, like when they were shutting down Cuba and they were having protests there, they wouldn't let people come from Cuba to America, but they'll let people from Honduras and other areas that really we don't need to come up through here through the Mexican border illegally, and they're happy with it.
Exactly. And you notice during COVID, the Canadian border's closed. The southern border is not.
Right. But, and even what they've been saying on the news,
2015
demographics is destiny. They've been saying that, and then they want to say that the replacement theory is a racist Republican thing, when they've been saying it since Obama days.
Yeah, and generally, and even if it's accurate, generally speaking, Republicans don't care, because they don't generally tend to look at what people look like. They look at what people do, what they think, their ideology, their participation in society.
Right.
Right. You know, kind of like Martin Luther King. We like to look at the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
It's kind of like, who was that guy that freed the slaves? Oh yeah, Abraham Lincoln, who said, all men are created equal.
Goes back, yeah.
Goes
back. Yeah, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
You know the thing.
Yeah. Anyway, want to get rid of the police. You get rid of the police, you can have centralized federal government policing, or no policing at all. It's worse. Life gets worse. People get more miserable, and they're more amenable to the socialist takeover. And then you combine them with 3 generations of people brainwashed in universities, and you can figure for each generation, 60% are going to figure out that all these ideas are stupid, but that's still 30% of the population that hasn't figured it out. And then you add to that agitation by people that are in disadvantaged groups, and then you grow that disadvantaged group by flooding the market by new disadvantaged people that will never be able to get ahead, because they're not supposed to be here, so they're not positioned to take part in society. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So the goal of all of it is to overthrow the government. It's not because Black Lives Matter. And that's borne out in their positions. Like, first of all, the fact that one of their biggest, Jesus, Obama even said that the biggest challenge facing Black community is fatherless homes. And
right, and that's another thing that Black Lives Matter want to do, is to destroy the nuclear family.
Exactly, because fatherless homes create miserable lives, more miserable people, more amenable to the implementation of socialism. The socialists play the long game.
Which is also what Planned Parenthood is playing a huge part in.
Growth in the Black community.
You're breaking up, boss.
Are you there?
Are dropping. Birth rates are dropping. Because they're making sure that Black people are killing their babies 2-to-1 to white people.
Right.
So again, keep the group small, and of course, who's the minority become under these socialist governments? They eventually become the socialist government when they are implemented.
Okay.
I'm just laughing because there's some folks going by yelling about flowers.
About flowers?
Yeah.
Weird.
So, and then like everything else that the left is pushing works into this. As far as the Marxist plot to devolve society, I think we've pretty much established that link in how it relates to BLM. Now, as far as the results that they're getting, obviously the goal of installing leftist district attorneys, they're letting violent criminals out, which is causing rises in violent crime. I know they say overall crime is down, but you can only be told that they're not going to do anything about the crime so many times before you stop reporting it. So I think part of the overall crime rate dropping has to do with people not bothering to report.
Because
can you hear me?
Because the police aren't doing anything.
Yeah, so like if somebody stole my bike this week and next week somebody stole my weed whacker, I'm not going to bother to call them about the weed whacker when they won't even take the call about the bike that has a serial number that they can track.
Right.
So, and then incidents of crime. Well, it used to be these organized retail crime rings would go in 1- and 2-man groups, and they over and over and over again over time. Well, now they're just going into stores and just cleaning the places out. So I would probably argue that the property crime dollar value is up, even if the incidence is down. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So whereas the retail theft before reported for was somebody who stole a couple necklaces. Now they smashed the entire case and took all the necklaces. Come on. Does that you follow my logic on that?
Yeah.
So, but murder rates are obviously up, and I just find that ironic, especially the extra 2,000 to 3,000, depending on where you get your statistics, Black people being killed every year as a result directly of the BLM movement, defunding police, the lowered police presence leading to, and the lowered prosecution of Black criminals is leading directly to more Black deaths.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense if Black Lives Matter.
Right. So, and then the argument that's made by BLM supporters is, well, BLM is specifically meant to address a specific cause of police brutality. Okay, but police brutality, if that's your issue, Black people were not the primary victims of police brutality. They were not the primary victims of death at the hand of Black people. So, again, you're driving this racial wedge in. And if you want the police are being overzealous, but don't divide it by race, especially when you're dealing with the people responsible for 60% of violent crime, but a third of the deaths at the hands of the police. So, statistic that I find interesting because, of course, I mean, when you break it down, group, 95% of murders are committed by people of their own ethnicity. So when there's 1,000 more Black people dying at the hands of other Black people, that's a much graver risk to Black people than police brutality. Like the difference between the number of Black people killed at the hands of other Black people and the number is 5 times the number of Black people killed by police in the entire year of 2019. Because you're looking at 500 people killed by police, and that's not even taking into account whether those people are armed, whether those people are resisting, whether or not those people killed a cop, like immediately before they were shot. Doesn't take any of that into account, just people that died. 5 times more people is the difference between the number of Black people killed before Black Lives Matter and now. So BLM is actually responsible for 5 times more Black deaths than police. So it's hard to take the organization serious at its face if it's causing 5 times more death through its activism and not really bringing down the rate. If anything, I'd argue that violent confrontations between police and Black people are getting more frequent because they're empowering Black people to resist the police, which is going to increase the likelihood that the police are going to be put in a situation where they have to take a life to save their own.
Right. Which they should. They should be able to do that. I mean, that's their job.
Yeah, beyond it being their job, they've got families they want to go home to too.
Exactly, which is why it's their job to make sure that they protect themselves. That's why they run around with guns. and here's the thing, and I think the majority of Americans understand this, that if you odds are you might go to jail, but you'll be alive as long as you do what the cops tell you to do. And there's some good news on this front, though, because I'm just looking up. Newsweek has said people are growing tired of the Black Lives Matter movement. Support for them has dropped from some of the steepest declines in support for the movement were found among African American respondents. Their support for the movement's goals dropped from 67% to 50%. April, and this was this report came from today. Today's the 21st, right? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
So they've lost support among their own people by 11 percentage points.
Well, they've lost support because people are actually beginning to be educated on what their actual goals are, and even if they're not aware of their goals, they're becoming aware of the results that are going to give them those goals.
The poll also found that the support for police reform has declined since April last year as well. Support for reducing funding for state and local police departments to divert money to social services dropped 7 points from 38 to 31%.
Right.
So their whole summer of love back in 2020 has really caused them more issues than it has helped them.
Yeah, and even that was causing deaths.
And it also saw a decline in support for allowing citizens to sue individual police officers.
The excessive use of force or misconduct from 59
to 54%, which is for restricting the ability of police officers.
their body cameras.
71% to 64%, and for banning chokeholds by police officers from 62% to. So people are really getting fed up with this whole Black Lives Matter BS.
Are you still there?
Because I'm still here. It says you're still connected. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
So, were you able to catch my last point about like if you take away the cops' inability to immobilize the subject, what that actually, I mean, they do these things as a last resort in order to stop the confrontation. And if you take away their ability to stop the confrontation, you're actually going to increase the likelihood that the confrontation is going to end up becoming deadly if you're taking away the police's resources.
Right.
So if you take away a chokehold that could knock them out but save their life,
right,
then you're making it more likely that the confrontation person save their life.
Right.
So,
which
and then,
I think they have every right to do.
I think anybody whose life is being endangered or they're at risk of severe bodily harm, anybody in that situation, like police or otherwise.
Right. Anybody who's being attacked, which is why I believe women should be running around
an area with
concealed firearms.
Hey, and I like the liberal or the relaxation of the concealed carry laws in Texas.
Across the nation, even.
Yeah. Well, now that you mention it, isn't it funny? That have some of the worst gun crime rate, great gun crimes.
The gun laws.
Gun laws. Like you mentioned Buffalo, the guy was able to buy a gun in one of the most restrictive states.
Right. And modify
and that was illegal. Why? Because of the whole mentality of not letting the police do their job and take dangerous people off the street.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the guy who rammed the car.
The parade in Waukesha. So you keep breaking up on me. Okay, you back? You were talking about the parade in Waukesha?
Yeah.
But did you go into a building or something? Okay, well, it looks like we've lost Rob there for a moment.
Exiting the building.
Like I was saying.
Yeah.
Anyways, like I was saying, Yeah, the states with the strictest gun laws have the most gun violence, which is weird. Like they think that gun laws are going to prevent criminals. The reason that there's crime is because people don't obey the law.
Right.
So
Well,
if you
and
make a law
Fighting citizens from having guns.
just it just gives the criminals more power to just go ahead and
The law, because
guess what? That person that they're going to commit a armed robbery or does not have the means to protect themselves.
yeah, well, if you look at a lot of these, well, I will point out that almost every single one of the mass shootings take place in a gun-free zone.
Exactly.
That's the first irony to me, is that they all take place in a gun-free zone.
It's a gun-free zone, but only law-abiding citizens are going to abide by those laws. Criminals don't give a rat's.
Well, and then they also know that, if they go and start shooting there, they're not going to get shot at.
Right, because nobody is going to be able to.
police officer.
Exactly.
And
So,
how and another ironic thing is how many of those areas have armed guards or armed policemen patrolling the entire time? Apparently not a lot. I mean, granted, there was a security guard at the grocery store who was able to shoot, but then the guy was wearing body armor.
Right.
And they want to ban body armor for civilians. It's like, are you kidding me?
Well, and of course that ignores the primary point of the right to bear arms is, we're supposed to be able to bear arms not only to protect ourselves, but also to challenge the government in the event that they ever try and, abuse the rights of the people. So, and it is funny that there's always big citizenry disarmament at the outset of every socialist revolution, which is what I think that we're on the verge of here. BLM fell short of their intended goals.
Well, yeah,
the way I see it. I think
because they came out
Violently.
and destructively.
I don't think even violence is a problem for the majority of the citizenry. I mean, the popularity of the World Star videos and all of that show that the citizenry doesn't necessarily have a problem with violence.
Well, when it comes to their neighborhoods, they do.
Yeah, and then they'll complain about the violence in their neighborhood, and then go online and watch a bunch of World Star videos.
Right.
So there's some major hypocrisy involved too. If you follow my logic on that.
Explain.
So while denouncing violence as a society, we're monetizing videos glorifying violence, like the World Star videos and stuff like that, by continuing to watch the crap. Are you with me?
Say that again.
So like we're complaining about violence at the same time we help monetize people that make money off of violence, like World Star videos and all of that, by watching them and watching the ads associated with them.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of hypocrisy. So I guess the good way to put it is we don't care about it as long as it's not happening to us. So, and I think the reason there's such blowback now against the whole BLM movement is because now it's starting to have a negative impact on everybody. they weren't able to achieve their goals before the backlash got too hard. So, like, if I think we'd really be in trouble if leftists were smarter.
World Star is hip hop.
Yeah, the World Star hip hop videos, but like 90% of the World Star videos were people fighting or randomly assaulting people, and yet for 5 years they were like the most popular videos on the internet.
This is the first time I've ever heard of him. That's terrible.
Yep, and if you go through and watch, I'm not
831,000 search results. Ugh.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And they're almost exclusively violent. And it's funny that the group of people that they're trying to agitate to become violent and create social strife so they can bring in their socialism are also targeted by their own members of their own society, with rap music and gangland movies and all of that, glorifying a life of violence, a life of crime, and then of course giving people unrealistic expectations of what they can do in life. Yeah, of course, it's possible for anyone, if you work hard, to be successful in whatever endeavor you want, if you got the talent, the brains, the timing. Like, there's a lot that goes into being successful. I mean, there's some luck to it, and there's some skill to it, and there's a whole lot of work ethic to it.
Right, like right now, the most people we've got was.
I don't care. I'll still keep doing it.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm still here with you.
So, but yeah, it's the and then the pushing for shortcuts. Like, it's another way of like trying to get people to look for the shortcut, look for the short way. So eventually, when they go, okay, well, and you kind of like hear some of it with the like pushes for a wealth tax and all of that. It's all about getting people, hey, let's give you an easy way out and we'll attack these people. But sooner or later, the aggressors in the situation become the victims. The peasantry become the slaves in the gulags.
Right.
Those
would be the ones that they come for first, once they get what they want.
Exactly. Because they're the ones that they're going to see as a threat to their power, because they're the ones that violently overthrew the last government.
Right. And they won't want that uprising to happen again, so they'll have to put them in check.
Exactly. And by dividing it on racial lines with such a small minority of the population, one that's very easy to target, when they do make the switch, it'll be easy. And when we're only, 50 years past every single one of them voting against giving African Americans civil rights, I would say that they have no problem, since a lot of the people that were supporting those point of views
Yes. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I thought you were going. Did you
lose your?
I thought I did.
Yeah,
I might have lost my train of thought.
It seemed open-ended.
Anyway, so yeah, no, my point on that is that you get the people at the core of the belief to be the small percentage of the population, a population that you've spent 200 years oppressing. Now suddenly you're empowering them, but what are you empowering them to do? To overthrow the status quo so you can have power what in Lord's name would make them think that it's not going to immediately go back to them being the oppressed class once they have the power, when they already obviously don't think much of you? And like, if you want to see what the left thinks of black people, just look at their rhetoric and CRT and stuff like that. You're all victims. You're all oppressed. You can't get ahead. You can't do anything. Well, I mean, I think we have, 200 years of evidence that anybody who's smart, intelligent, and hardworking can get ahead. And I've like, right. And then like, I mean, I've had like conversations with people like where they start out like saying how they've been discriminated against, and then get into a conversation with them and like, like up for a promotion against somebody, and the other person got it, but the other person was working 2 to 3 more hours a day, was taking extra classes to learn the field better, stuff like that, whereas they didn't get it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But they've
instead that has actually.
Yeah, so but they're trying to create the victim class, and when you get the actual people that like to oppress, silence, and withhold hold people down in power, once they've already trained you to be a victim, who do you think their first victim is going to be? And then like some of the like the New York shooter and his like proposition that there needs to be a race war. It's kind of funny that they're trying to get 13% of the population to start a race war when the group that accounts for 60% of the population has 80% of the guns in this country.
Well, and now there's been an increase in Black Americans purchasing guns legally. So
no, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know, but that 13% is actually dropping at an exponential rate, is what I'm saying. So that 13% that they're trying to start a race war isn't actually 13%, because not all of that 13% of the population all think the same. And I think that's where their downfall is they think they all think that way.
Right.
And what do they do when they find out that those part of the 13% don't think that way? They use racist slurs against them, like call them an Uncle Tom, or they call him an Uncle Tom. They call him
the blackface of the Republican Party.
Yeah, the blackface of the Republican Party, or a race denier.
Right, and then the part that I find most ironic, like the whole like starting of the hashtag BLM, going back to George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman was not a white dude. George Zimmerman is Afro-Peruvian.
Okay, yeah.
But like his descendant is his descendancy, he's like descended from Afro-Peruvians.
Right.
So he's part Black and Hispanic, and this is your oppressive white guy model.
It doesn't make sense.
And then of course
some crazy stuff or some shady stuff.
Yeah, well,
at the very least.
Yeah, well, and then you like notice that they like whitewash when they pull all the pictures to run of him. They pull the cute pictures of him when he was 9 years old, not the pictures of him at 11 years old, like posing with the 9mm.
Right.
You know,
well, that doesn't fit their, doesn't fit their narrative.
Right, and then like you look at the Kenosha kid. What was his name?
Kyle Rittenhouse, man. Don't forget
Kyle
that
Rittenhouse.
name.
Yeah, they made it sound like that he was a racist out there killing Black Lives Matter protesters, and they made it sound like that, or they.
Well, he did kill Black Lives Matter protesters, but he didn't kill one single black person.
Yeah, they were all white people who were attacking him.
Even the one black person that attacked him, he didn't shoot him. He shot at him, but he didn't shoot him.
Right. And he didn't shoot unless he was being attacked.
Felons. The Grosskreutz kid, he wasn't even supposed to have a handgun.
Mm-hmm. Oh wait, you mean criminals don't follow gun laws? That doesn't compute.
Well, I guess it doesn't if you're a leftist progressive Democrat. Like I was saying.
So
that's why gun-free zones, I think, are stupid. And I think it's stupid that they don't want you to carry on campus because there's been a lot of school shootings, like in college campuses. I mean,
arm everybody. You're not going to be able to stop the shootings, but you'll at least be able to limit the impact.
Mm-hmm.
How much nicer would it be when there's a shooting on campus and the only person who gets shot is the shooter?
There was a shooting at a church that got stopped because of a 70-year-old man that was packing.
There was a convention here where here in Texas, I forget what it was. It was not long after the whole Fort Hood thing. Explain to me why a military base, nobody had any guns. Anyway, but I digress. But I would have to look up the statistics on it, or the data on it. But there was a convention or something going on, and like some Islamists were coming in, and like they are all armed to the teeth and got gunned down by civilians in the parking lot before they could ever make it to the door.
And that's a good thing. That's exactly what should happen.
Well, yeah, and if it wasn't for these gun-free zones, how many of these mass shootings would have one or two victims to the point that they're not even considered mass shootings because one of the two victims is the perpetrator? So
in a mass shooting, it starts at what, 4 people?
Yeah. Well, and then I also want to I want to throw one more thing in on this. One of the arguments that a lot of these people make about shooting people's guns out of people's hands or shooting them in the leg. Okay, first of all, if you shoot them in the leg, their arms are still free to shoot you.
Well, I guess that's one point, but not every person that has a concealed carry license, or when you get into a situation like that and adrenaline is pumping, you're not a supreme expert super shooter.
It's not just easy. I say if you
hit him in the chest, then boom, that's good.
You aim for center of mass, especially in a moving target, because that's all you're gonna hit. And I mean, you hope that you hit them dead center. That's why all these police shoot people right in the chest. You don't see them shooting people in the head. You don't. I mean, if they were just trying to kill people, they'd be shooting them in the head. Right. And that's not what they're doing. You know what I mean? If it was possible to pinpoint a body location, if you're trying to kill somebody, you'd be shooting them in the head. They're not getting shot in the head. They're getting shot in the center of mass, because you shoot for center of mass and you keep firing until the motion stops, because that is when the threat is ended.
Yep.
Now there was one where I don't have all the data yet, but the guy they told him to put up his hands and then shot him, and it was the guy's third shooting, and I would question why the person was on the street, but I don't have all the data on that, but that one seems kind of funny. That one seemed kind of odd to me.
Let's face it, there's not all cops are great cops, but not all cops are bad cops, right? I don't.
Right. Well, and then cops can make mistakes.
I honestly don't think all cops around the country are waking up to go to work to do a job that they sworn under oath to do, that they were going to protect and serve. I don't think that a vast majority of them are waking up every morning, putting on their gear and saying, I'm going to go kill me some black people today. Wonder how many of them black boys I can kill. I don't think that. I refuse to believe that that's what's happening. I've been treated bad by policemen
I've been treated. I'm white as all get out, and I've been treated bad by every cop I've ever dealt with.
Many times I've been, and a lot poorly. I should have been. There's several times when I should have been like not moving the next day because of the way I act.
All they did
was what they should have done to George Floyd is throw me in the back of the fucking paddy wagon and send me to the fucking lockup.
Well,
and most of the time because I was under the influence of alcohol or drugs. So, I mean, I deserved it.
Right. And like, I'm sorry, George Floyd, he died because he was high. Right. Not because they knelt on the back of his neck.
Well, and you know, I wish that we could. Either way, I know he was going to die, and I don't think that being on his back, because I don't think he was from
out of the trial.
He wasn't on his neck the whole time, and I know that's not why he died. But what I do think is they should have just.
He was in an SUV
before they even pulled him out and tried to put him into the cop car. And the cop car that they were putting him in was a pretty good sized SUV as well. So what they should have done they should have just threw him.
And they had
him in there, shut the doors, and then drove away
and let him die in the back seat. I've never has a cop ever been like, oh, let me go. I need to be out on the ground. And the cops just let me back out of the car and set me down on the police.
Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't happen because
their job is to neutralize the situation.
That way, crowds like they were there during the
George Floyd death wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have been around. And even
that were with him, we're telling him to stop fighting. So I mean,
the whole George Floyd incident got blown out of proportion and never even had to go there.
Like you said, I mean,
he had the enough fentanyl in his system to kill 3 people. Yeah, I don't know that that's a true stat, but he had enough in there to kill more than one person.
Right, and then there's also the whole point that he did have they knew who he was. He has a history of violence, and like, I'm sorry, the dude was not complying from moment one of the conversation.
No. And here's another thing.
And he did keep, and when he was reaching in the car, they did find a weapon in the car.
Well, and he also popped a pill when they were. But here's my thing. How long did it take for the police to show up at the Cup Foods after he tried to purchase something with a counterfeit $20 bill? Like, why did he stick around? What I don't know any criminal that would have been like, oh, I just committed a crime, so I'm going to stay around the scene. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
If it was me, I would have been like, oh shit, he would. Oh shit, he found out that I fucking gave him a fucking counterfeit. You know that he knew that he had that counterfeit bill on him because the guy that he was with went in like 2 hours before that trying to buy something with the same counterfeit $20 bill and was denied. He was like, the cashier was like, no, I'm not taking this. This is counterfeit. Go. And the guy left. 2 hours later, George Floyd comes up with that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, this is just, none of this should have happened.
Right, but they just keep working the narratives, and then you fast forward to Michael Brown, and that whole thing was false. So I guess it's a rewind from George Floyd, but fast forward from Zimmerman, that was all false. The hands up, don't shoot was false.
Not false. They still keep take it back to Kyle Rittenhouse. The media still tries to say that he killed black people. And there's people still today that think that Kyle Rittenhouse shot black people.
Yeah.
And it's all because of the media. The media that's going around straight up lies. And
which is controlled by leftists that all went and got their liberal media training at liberal universities.
Right.
They all got their degrees at liberal universities. Every last one of them.
I know.
That's
Because most universities
are liberal leftist universities, which is a shame.
So, and then, yeah, and then, like, just, again, you take away the police, more violent crime. Fewer police, slower response times, and how many of those situations just lack of police presence caused them, or a slowed down response time? And then it's gonna get worse, because God, would you want to be a police officer in today's climate? I wouldn't.
Maybe if I was a corrupt person who didn't like to abide by the law, and that's the kind of cops that are going to be able to be part of the police force,
right? So yeah, the ones that'll look the other way and not pay attention to what's going on. Yeah, it's gonna spiral worse, because the fewer cops you have, the worse crime's gonna get, and the more violent confrontations are going to be, which means the more vilified they're going to be, and then the more vilified they are, the fewer cops there's going to be. Like, it's a horrible downward spiral. And I love in some of these leftist cities where they're trying to backtrack, but they can't get police officers because nobody wants to be a cop for them, because, hey, you're saying you need me today, and tomorrow you'll be like trying to string me up. Right.
And they're trying to blame the whole defund the police movement on Republicans. I'm like, what? Wait, how do you think that's gonna fly? That doesn't make any sense to me. Republicans were all talking about back to blue.
And I love that they like try and say, well, I never said defund the police. Really? Here's a recording of you saying defund the police.
Right.
And we could pull up 2-3 whole years of you guys saying that.
Right. Well, 5 years. Very much since 2014.
Ever since Black Lives Matter came around.
Yeah, Maxine.
It's all about police reform. Right. Cory Bush.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and what's that chick's name? Maxine. Yeah, Maxine Waters. Nancy Pelosi. Joe Biden. Joe Biden is the one that is the funniest to me. How he sits there and talks about racism and Jim Crow when this dude was actually there voting for racist shit.
Right.
Was proud friend of
Robert Byrd, the Grand Cyclops
Robert Byrd
of the
and Strom Thurmond.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No. Joe Biden is the worst racist there is.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, the goal is everything that they're doing is like bits and pieces to collapse society so they can instill Marxism. And I mean, that's the whole point of it. That's the point of BLM. That's the point of the border policy. That's the point of inflating our currency, is to make regular Americans suffer so we'll be amenable to a socialist society, because they're going to claim that they're going to give everything back to us. But they seem to keep missing the point that, like, if you take everybody out of the workforce and give us money, we're still not going to be able to buy anything because nobody's producing anything.
Exactly.
So, baby formula, anybody?
Right. But don't try and make your own. You know who doesn't have a baby formula problem?
Mexico?
Europe. Well, yeah, Mexico. That's because we're giving them all of ours. And Europe and Canada.
Well, no, we got a bunch of it staged down at the border, but yeah, Mexico's got plenty of baby formula.
That's right. We're giving it to them.
And then a lot of these countries, they actually have a lot higher rates of people breastfeeding because they haven't pushed their women out of being stay-at-home moms, where now you're in the workforce and it's virtually impossible for you to breastfeed.
Right. Well, I mean, you can always pump, but there's also, we could get into that. Also, I mean, there's all sorts. My wife wasn't able to breastfeed because she wasn't producing. We couldn't pump enough, and we had problems with So
I mean, there's all kinds of
things that go
Well, I mean,
along
there's all kinds of challenges, but the human race marched on
right.
when there was no formula.
Oh yeah, and there's
I mean,
there's all kinds of
I mean,
supplements that you can use too. Like
yeah,
I'm sure
we
you
have
know that goat milk
we have
is
backups now, but low production increases as the demand increases.
well. How
Like-
many people are making baby formula in the United States?
3 companies.
Huh?
3 companies.
3 companies, and the biggest
Yeah,
manufacturer
and one of them had their facility shut down by the government.
right.
Well, they closed their facility down first after the first 2 cases or something because
because of the government.
They put a recall out on it,
and then come to find out that none of the reason that the babies died were because of a result of their formula.
Right.
So it's like
But
these
we got to make
these mothers were letting their formula sit for a day or whatever. I mean, you can't just let that shit sit; it goes bad fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a ton of nutrients in there, and those nutrients will feed bacteria just as well as they feed people.
But the funny thing is now if people put out recipe,
for breastfeeding.
Facebook flags the post with misleading and just a bunch of BS.
For 60 years,
They're
saying that
don't do that. It's bad for your baby. You could kill them. I'm like, people have been doing this since like.
So I don't know what you're talking about.
All right.
But like I said, that could be a whole totally different episode.
Yeah, we have lots of time to do lots of shows.
Yeah, there's plenty to talk about, and the current events ain't changing anytime soon. At least not for another 2 years.
Right. So anyway, we got way off of the BLM topic, but yeah, it's all part of the agenda. BLM is just part of the agenda of the leftists to install a socialist agenda in the place most likely to resist socialism, which is the United States. Right. Obviously we saw in Australia, like they were thought as like almost like cousins to us as far as their beliefs in freedom. But obviously the COVID pandemic taught that was not really the case.
Well, as soon as they gave up their guns, they should have known.
Yeah.
They should have never done that.
But yeah, they went truly Orwellian in Australia during the pandemic, and here I thought it was funny the simultaneous hypocrisy of BLM protests, the CDC saying that racism is a health issue, so like it's okay that they're having these super spreader Black Lives Protest Matter events. You can make the argument since Black people have the higher mortality rates that maybe they were allowing the Black Lives Matter protests because they were trying to kill Black people. Maybe, I don't know. I know that sounds kind of conspiracy theory-ish, but hey, if the shoe fits. But you get the people out there protesting against the lockdowns and protest against the masks and protest against the vaccinations, and we're holding super spreader events. Fast forward, AOC unmasked at her New York gala.
Right. While her servants are masked.
Mm-hmm. Nancy Pelosi getting her hair done. Gavin Newsom at the French Bistro.
The playoffs in Los Angeles, the mayor. I held my breath, so it was okay that I took my picture with Magic Johnson, who has HIV and possibly the most immunocompromised person in Los Angeles.
What are you talking about, man? Obviously, money cures AIDS.
Are you gonna get into the South Park episode?
I'm just saying, like, he's rich and he's been living just fine with AIDS for 50 years. Right?
Well, no, you know what cures AIDS is not listening to Anthony Fauci. That's what cures AIDS.
There you go. Well, that cures just about anything medical. Just don't listen to Fauci.
Except stupidity.
So yeah, I mean, so yeah. So my entire thesis on BLM is that it was strictly 100% a Marxist creation, like the brainchild of man, and like pushed by Patrice Cullors and her little sidekicks. But I don't even think they believed in socialism. They obviously don't believe Black Lives Matters. They were just in it for the buck.
Right. They just wanted to make a quick buck off of Black lives.
And now that they've had their nonprofit status revoked, we're gonna start seeing a lot more of what really is going on with the money being donated to Black Lives Matters.
Mm-hmm.
Because those disclosures are going to have to be a lot more public. So, and then, oh my gosh, the mind job of the way if somebody said Black Lives Matters and somebody responded all lives matter, like nobody's missing the point. The people shouting Black Lives Matter are missing the point. You know, I love how angry like BLM supporters would get if you like came back with Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter, how angry they would get, and like claiming that you missed the point. No, I'm not missing the point. Like I acknowledge that Black Lives Matter, but the whole thesis behind Black Lives Matter is a false narrative, and the whole movement is basically people not being informed on the issues and the actual goals of the organization, and what they want.
Well, it's actually it's a racist statement. I mean, think about it. Let's just say lives matter. If you have to put a color in front of it, that's racist.
Yeah.
You don't even have to say all lives matter, because not all lives matter. I tell you what, Ted Bundy, his life didn't matter. Who was the Oklahoma sitting bomb? Timothy McVeigh, his life didn't matter. I can tell you that.
Ted Kaczynski.
I mean, name any of these murderous bastards. Ted Bundy, his life didn't matter. Charles Manson, his life doesn't matter.
Osama bin Laden, his life didn't matter.
Right. I mean, not all lives matter. Nancy Pelosi, to me, her life doesn't matter.
I was thinking Ilhan Omar.
That too. Who's the other one? Oh, AOC. I mean, anybody in the squad. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I love AOC. She's like such a dip that like her new retort is that people are just trying to screw her.
Yeah, Republicans are just mad they can't date me.
Oh my God. Go back to tending bar badly.
Right.
Like that's a funny thing. Like you don't see anybody getting on TV going, "Oh, she was such a great bartender." So she was a mediocre bartender and now a horrible congresswoman.
That's because every time she came up to serve him, they were like, "Why the long face?"
Shit. Oh.
So, anyways, yeah, I think we had a good show. I think we made our point that.
Right. Now,
with the increase in violent crime or any crime, actually, within the past 13.
Yeah, and I do think the narrative that the overall crime rates are down, I think that's a completely false narrative. I think people are just not bothering to report crimes because you're not going to waste your time like waiting 5 hours for the police to show up for something they're not going to do anything about anyway.
Well, and if they do something about it, 4 hours later, the same criminal is back out on the streets because of these George Soros-backed prosecutors.
Well, and with my little tiny house that I built out in the woods that I like run on my generator, like somebody tried to steal it. They tried to cut through the cable that I have strapping it to the tree. They're more likely to be able to cut down the tree than they are to be able to cut that lock. But they tried. I didn't call the police for that because I'm going to wait there forever. and they're not going to do anything. So what's the point? But that was a property crime. Like my lock was damaged, and they tried to steal my $400 generator, and they're on camera because I have my wildlife cameras like hidden around there that are motion activated. So if anybody goes messing around my house, it's recorded. And they're camouflaged because they're trail cams. Huh?
You need to electrify that shit.
I don't know about that. Yeah, well, you know, I mean, it's rural, so I don't think it's gonna slow the tweakers down. So, but yeah, it's funny. As soon as I let the word out that my video camera recorded people messing with my generator, like I stopped seeing the quad trails coming back by my house, and I stopped seeing footprints on my property. Like the word got out that I have cameras, and it caught them, and they never saw the cameras, and like people just stay away now.
Well,
so, but I mean, it's example of property crime that people just aren't going to bother reporting. And then like, who's got time to wait 5 hours for a police non-emergency because the police are understaffed, thanks to the BLM movement.
Right. And you know, Trump didn't help because he put in some police reform while he was in office too. I mean, Trump wasn't our savior, but he did a lot of good, and you know, like bail reform, he got in on that.
Well, I mean, honestly, okay, so I think violent crime, no bail reform. I think procedural crimes and crap like that, I think they're ridiculous. I think some of the stuff that they put, yeah, like I don't know. I just think,
like you say, violent crime. If you're gonna be violent, society has no use for you. You don't belong in society. Rape, pedophilia, murder, robbery. If you don't want to go out and try yourself by yourself, what good are you?
Right.
If you're gonna be violent, society doesn't need you.
And even just assaults in general, like I thought we're supposed to be a civilized society, and people are still randomly assaulting each other. I mean, what the?
Right. And they want to talk about racism, but they don't want to talk about all the people. And then they wanted to blame. They wanted to blame Trump for it. I'm like, but wait a minute, these are black people attacking Asian people. I thought Trump was a racist and he didn't like black people. Why are these black people going and attacking Asian people because of Trump? You got all these black people thinking that Trump's a racist. Wouldn't it make more sense if black people were attacking white people?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, it all comes down to it's all part of the Marxist socialist agenda. All of it. Dissolve society so you can install your socialism. Because of course, all the people that are behind the push to install socialism think that they're going to be at the top of the ladder, and yeah, we'll see what happens. So,
but socialism is supposed to be everyone is equal to I can't remember what the thing is. Socialism does not work, and nobody will ever get ahead. All it is trying to bring down the middle class to the lower class.
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's like equity, like just the idea behind equity. All it means is that everybody finishes in the same place. It doesn't mean that everybody finishes in a good place.
Right, and it doesn't mean that everybody is equal. You can't have equality and that's honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's supposed to be equality of opportunity. There's never going to be equity of outcome because people are not going to put the same amount of effort in. People do not have the same abilities and skills. So you're going to have people that should, by all means, end up at different levels of the spectrum. I have no problem with Like, and people talk about like how, like, oh my gosh, we could do a whole episode on like Elon Musk, and like now they're trying to paint him as being a recipient of the benefits of apartheid, and it's like, the dude was like 11 years old when he published his first program and got money to go to college in Canada. Like, the dude was like making money since he was a kid, and he just never stopped.
And even in those reports, they say how he was defending the minority group of his schools from people that were picking on the minority group. So it's like, you guys are not making any sense with anything that you guys say.
Yeah, and well, his dad was a anti-apartheid activist and everything else. So,
and they say that in their reporting. It's like, are you retarded? You guys seriously don't even know what you're trying to say.
So, well, I mean, here's the problem with Elon Musk. You know, he's fighting the socialist revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the old saying is accurate and apropos, and Elon Musk shows it. If you never held any liberal ideas, you didn't have a heart. If you didn't become a conservative, you don't have a brain.
Right.
Anyways, I think this has been long enough for this show. What we're going to talk about tomorrow?
That's a good question. What should we talk about tomorrow?
I know I wanted to do like a little kind of a historical look. I'd like to actually march along tomorrow the path of the Democrat Party, going back to when the Republicans left the Democratic Republican Party and formed the Republican Party, and just kind of like trace their steps going through the major platform involvements up through current times.
Like the Whig Party, and yeah, that sounds good to me.
Well, I mean, the dissolution of the Whig Party was part of what created the Republican Party, and then a lot of the original Republican Party were people that left the Democratic Republican Party because the Democratic Republican Party was pro-slavery.
We could talk about that tomorrow, though.
The Republican Party was abolitionist party. So yeah, we'll talk about that and why we can't get a third party in this country, because even when you get independence, they're really either a Democrat or a Republican.
Right. We're going to talk about what do we do to get rid of the Democrat Party?
Yeah, that's a long journey, but we'll start tomorrow with the birth of the Democratic Party and how they've marched their leftist supremacist agenda all the way through to today, and just manipulating the narrative to make it seem like they're not.
So that sounds like a good plan to me. I'm looking forward to that.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Hope everybody who ends up listening to this had a good time. Again, it's just kind of a conversation. If anybody who listens would like to join the show, send a message through the comments on the Anchor platform. Go listen to us on the Anchor platform through Spotify, and we'll get the messages. Especially if you're on the left, I want to talk to you.
Yes, you do.
So thanks for listening, and Brad, thanks for joining on the show again. And we'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.